It's a new year, and we're glad to have you with us. As we ring in the year, we're asking, how have things changed, and where will those changes take us? In essence, what's the new normal for Africa in 2019? Welcome to Our Voices. I'm Ayan Bior.
And I am Hadiza Kiari.
And I am Oriani Tangishaka.
And I'm Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick. If 2019 is going to be anything like 2018, we're in for at least a dozen surprises. Now, of course, we can't predict the news, but there's a lot on the slate across the continent. And so here's a look at just some of the stories we'll be tracking in the year ahead.
Africa enters the new year with a humanitarian crisis that stretches across the continent and into Europe. The African Union has declared 2019 the year of refugees, returnees and internally displaced persons. More than 6 million African refugees and asylum seekers have fled their nations. 12 million more are on the run inside their own countries. 2019 will be a chance for the AU to tackle root causes, conflict, violence and natural disasters. From the World Economic Forum on Africa, trade shows and art exhibitions to conferences on health, science, innovation and women's empowerment, Africa has become a popular meeting point. Climate change will be the talk of the town in Accra, Ghana this June during Africa Climate Week. The summit will look at how to ramp up action and financing for climate-smart development. Global aviation experts will meet in Cape Town and Kigali this year as growing affluence on the continent creates greater demand for air travel. 2019 will be pivotal for nations seeking change and second chances. There is hard work ahead for Ethiopia as Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed looks to follow through on the dramatic economic and political reforms he introduced last year. Zimbabwe enters 2019 trying to rebuild its cash-strapped economy and recover from decades of rule by Robert Mugabe. The Democratic Republic of Congo is on edge following the December 30th vote to choose a new president. With fears of electoral fraud and post-election violence, the chances of a peaceful transition are unclear. Nigerians go to the polls next month. President Muhammadu Buhari will face off against Atiku Abubakar amid concerns over security, a struggling economy and rampant corruption. In South Africa, a litmus test for the ruling African National Congress in elections set for March. Even as President Cyril Ramaphosa tries to shake off his party's corruption scandals and shake up the economy, the question is whether opposition parties will gain traction. Also looking for another chance, Malawi's former president Joyce Banda. She returned to the country last year after 4 years of self-imposed exile. Banda is set to face off against President Peter Mutharika at the polls in May. Sports will take center stage in June with the Africa Cup of Nations. Defending champions Cameroon are looking to claim their second successive title. That nation lost the right to host the tournament over preparation delays and security concerns. A new host country will be announced in coming days.
2019 there. Certainly a year full of surprises, certainly very busy. On the news front, are there any stories that you guys are going to be following this year?
Lots of stories, Haiti. I mean, did you all ladies know that 2019 was proclaimed the year of return for blacks to Africa by the Ghanaian President Nana Akufo-Addo. So at the 73rd UN General Assembly that took place in September of last year, he invited African descent, to return back to Ghana. And according to the Ghanaian president, and I'll quote, he says, "The time has come for people of African descent to make the journey back home, where historic leaders and intellectuals like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., W.E.B. Du Bois, Maya Angelou, Stevie Wonder, who have all honored Ghana with their presence and been inspired by Ghana. Ghana has opened its arms wide and welcomes its brothers and sisters back home. Never again should Africans allow themselves to be enslaved. We are home." And get this, Year of the Return is the only centrally organized public-private partnership by an African nation to commemorate quarter centenary of the arrival of African to the United States. I mean, I'm definitely keeping my eyes to see how many, Africans and African Americans are going to return to Ghana.
They've been doing this for years now, where they've really been welcoming people. I know a lot of people have taken them up on this.
We've seen W.E.B. Du Bois, return to Ghana, and he was given automatic citizenship.
That's great.
To see who's going to be returning.
If 2019 is the year of return, I hope the Europeans can return our art. So we'll see about that.
That's true.
Well, the African Union's hoping that people will return in 2019. They've declared 2019, let me read it here, their theme for 2019 is the year of the refugees, returnees and internally displaced persons in Africa. And they say they're going to be used this year to really be looking at durable solutions to forced displacement. Now, I don't want to be too pessimistic here, but this is not a problem that just arrived on our doorsteps yesterday. I would be very interested to see what they're going to do differently this year that they have not done in the past 3 years to solve this problem. And it really is going to be about looking at some of the really ugly issues that we might not want to face. Conflict, climate change, poverty and unemployment, those are the push factors.
For sure.
So I'd be interested to see how effective they're going to be on that front.
For sure.
Well, speaking about the AU, the one theme that really dominated headlines in 2018 was allegations of sexual harassment within its own walls. And they're looking into the issue and they're trying to find solutions. But the women who spoke up about their experiences have really forged a new normal. And I hope that that really carries through this year. I hope that people who harass women at the AU and wherever are really held to account. But I'm really excited to see women actually speak up about their experiences, and I hope that there is follow through. As I mentioned, the AU has put together a special committee to look into this issue. So I hope that that works out well.
Yeah, great leadership is definitely key. I'm actually also in 2019 we'll be looking at some of the tensions in the leadership of the East Africa Community Bloc. I mean, there's been a lot of tension between countries, and we're looking at actually 2019 where President Paul Kagame is supposed to take over the leadership of the bloc of the 6 nations. But, rumors are that he might not actually follow through because of, the tensions that are mainly between Burundi and his country, Rwanda. This is after the 2015 attempted coup that failed in Burundi, and Burundi and the United States charging Rwanda for trying to help rebels to actually overthrow and destabilize Burundi. And since then, there's been a lot of tension between those 2 nations. And of course, Rwanda, rejects those allegations. So there's been a lot of tensions there. I remember in 2016, in fact, I was at the Capitol Hill covering Thomas Greenfield, the former assistant secretary, who actually said that the United States had credible reports that Rwanda was training refugees as well as children to destabilize Burundi. So since then, there's been really deep tensions between Rwanda and Burundi. And so President Paul Kagame actually might not, you want to come into that situation. So we'll see what happens. Actually, analysts are saying that, the bloc, the East African Community Bloc, might be going back to what happened in the 70s, where there were tensions between Tanzania and Uganda and Kenya and Tanzania, and the bloc almost split. So I'll be looking at that and seeing how it turns out.
Let's hope not.
And just makes me so worried when we're talking about going back to the 70s. You think that, this is 2019, we're going to need progress going forward.
Yeah.
And for me, Orion, I'm looking forward to the Nigerian election coming up in February. So, there with only 2 glaring options for presidential candidacy, it will be interesting to see how voters will be voting. Will they be voting for Buhari, the current Nigerian president, who has been known to fight corruption aggressively? On the other hand, we have Atiku Abubakar, who is the former vice president. But then Buhari, on one part, he had anti-corruption policies, very strong anti-corruption policies. One of them was the whistleblowing initiative, which was able to recover over $40 million of looted funds. And on the other hand, he's been accused of dragging the country into recession. So, but, the other candidate, who is Atiku Abubakar, has also been accused of, corruption. And I don't know how that's going to work, because he's also had some good things going for him. He came up with the Empower, which is, geared towards the youth. So it will really be interesting to see, where the votes are going to go.
Yeah, and Nigeria also has something else to look forward to, the Women's FIFA World Cup in June.
That's right.
Nigeria and actually South Africa, Haiti, are the only two
Well, I
African
hope
teams.
the women will make us proud this time, because the male soccer team, I mean,
You know what?
so embarrassing.
I hope they do as well. So that's going to be really exciting to watch. I'm going to have my Nigerian colors and my South African colors. If you're African, I will absolutely support you. So that's exciting for your country. On the east side of the continent, I will be taking a look at trash. You heard that right, trash. In Ethiopia, they have the first ever waste to energy plant. Listen to this, it's really cool. It's a $120 million plant called REPI. So it also has a really cute name. And what it is it's built in a landfill. And what that plant does is it takes trash and turns it into energy. So it's going to give Addis Ababa 30% of its energy needs, while at the same time taking up about 80% of waste. So it seems like a win-win situation for everything. So hopefully 2019 will be both cleaner and brighter for Ethiopia.
I can think of
And
so
Africa
many
too.
puns.
Yeah,
And Africa as a whole.
Sure.
We'll see.
Right. For me, also in 2019, I'm following very contentious, high-level corruption cases. Speaking of the East Africa and also corruption, I mean, in Kenya, I'm following some high-level corruption cases where actually government officials are being really looked at very closely in terms of corruption. I mean, it looks like in 2019 we might actually see some verdicts on those cases. You know, our colleague Esther Githui actually asked the president Uhuru Kenyatta when he was here in Washington and asked him how he wanted to be remembered, and he said, and I quote, "I want my legacy to be one of bringing our nation and our people together, a nation that will have confidence in its institution, a nation that will have left corruption and issues of nepotism and other things that have also destructive elements to our country." So we can see that several leaders on the continent are actually looking at corruption. We see Buhari, as you said, and many other leaders on the continent looking at corruption. In 2019, I'm also looking at the CEO Summit. The CEO Summit that will take place in Kigali in March. What's interesting about it this year is that they're going to be focusing on women and seeing how they can empower and enable women. So I'm looking forward to that conference and see what comes out of that summit, actually.
You know, I'm really interested in this whole idea of all the conferences happening in Africa. I don't know if you guys saw that trend in the package of all these events happening on the continent. Not just that they are happening, but where they're happening. You know, I'm from Cape Town, South Africa. I'm used to us being this host to all these many conferences and conventions, but I'm really seeing that from Cape Town to Kigali, Rwanda, which has really come out to emerged as
lots
this
of conference there.
Conference destination. It's wonderful, I think. Civil society, international development, medical and technology sectors all are having or seeing Africa as this meeting point. The world, I think, is actually starting to recognize the continent as an emerging market. So global suppliers and industries are coming to where they see this new growing customer bases. And I mean, the issues are in Africa.
That's right.
The work is in Africa. The economic upside is in Africa. The customers are in Africa. And this is also an opportunity for Africans to really be seen as the leaders that they are in these global conversations, of which Africa is such a big part. I think it sends the message that Africa is comfortable.
That's right.
Africa is
Absolutely.
safe. It's practical and it's affordable, and it's good for our airline carriers. It's good for the hospitality industry. It's good for job creation and all those businesses that support these events. So
That's right.
I'm really loving this trend, and I'm
it's a
really
safe
going to be
place.
looking
It's a
forward
safe
to
place
it.
that people
It's
can actually
fantastic.
meet.
There's so
and-
much to look forward to and also so much to talk about. And we want to get you talking on social media. Catch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Search for our handle at VOA Our Voices. We've got videos and updates. Be sure to share our pages with your friends.
Also, don't forget to use the hashtag VOA Our Voices.
And of course, we are on WhatsApp. You can send us your messages and your videos. Our number there, US country code +1 304 506 3638. Just another way you can reach out to us and add your voice to our conversation.
When we come back, we'll talk about the hopes for 2019, the challenges and opportunities ahead for African women. But first, we want to remind you that you are the fifth person on this panel, and it's time for your voices to be heard. Here's what some of you had to say about the year 2019. We'll be right back.
Actually, what we expect in 2019, inshallah, is a very beautiful year, because we're going to have a new election. Maybe we're going to have a new government, or we're going to have a continued government. But when it comes to the participation of women and youth, I think we have a lot to learn because we have so many issues that really indicates that we are not ready for the youth to take over the affairs of the government, and even the women we have, we are really trying for them to be there.
Voices, we're talking about the news and issues you're talking about.
Sharing stories of development and growth across Africa,
around the world, and in our lives.
Topics that inform, empower,
and change the rules.
It's time for Our Voices
with me, Haiti Adams Fitzpatrick,
and Hadiza Kiari,
and Ayan Bior,
and Orion Itangi Shaka.
Join us on Facebook at VOA Our Voices.
It's time for Our Voices.
You're watching Our Voices. Welcome back. We're celebrating the new year with a look at what's on the horizon for 2019. So ladies, I know I have my wish list ready. What are you hoping for? What are your wishes for 2019?
Lots of things.
I hope that this is the year that South Sudan enjoys stability. We have dominated headlines often for the wrong reasons. And, you know, this war has really just messed up the fabric of our society, our economy, and even our dignity. So I really hope that this year we can focus on the potential that South Sudan has and just, you know, put the conflict behind us.
Yeah.
You know, I also, speaking of South Sudan and these constant images we're seeing, these recurring images of war and destruction, I really hope, along with you, that we're also going to hold our leadership more responsible and accountable for a lot of what is wrong on the continent. We praise them when things are going right. In Ethiopia, I say things are going well right now, and we praise them for that. But, you know, we've seen this Time's Up movement, and I really think that we should start a Time's Up movement in Africa, that when leaders are in office and the people do not want them there anymore, or they vote at the ballot box, they should go. You know, I've seen, and we've done it successfully in the past. Yahya Jammeh in the Gambia, Robert Mugabe in Zimbabwe, Jacob Zuma in South Africa. And I think one of the few things that we get right most of the time in South Africa is protesting. But even the New York Times wrote about how South African protesters got it right, because to get a liberation movement that got the country out of apartheid, to get them to recall a very popular president inside the party, that takes some doing. But I think Africans have shown that if they want their leaders to leave, they will take to the streets and tell them to do so. Not because the West wants that, but because Africans want that. I hope we'll see more Time's Up movements.
Especially young people, for sure.
True, that's true. And I agree with you, Haiti. Speaking about protest, you know, we've seen the youth fight for inclusion in politics with the Not Too Young to Run campaign that was successful. You know, it was tremendously successful. So for me, I mean, the hope is I look forward to see more youth initiative, particularly targeting corrupt practices, you know, not only in Nigeria, but all across Africa, because we know that the roots of our problems, you know, boils down to corruption.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, for me, I mean, it's definitely, I'm hoping that this year, many even the years to come, that we'll see leaders, as you said, it's all going back to leaders that are encouraged, that will encourage and will strengthen the bonds of solidarity as Africans. You know, we need leaders that are Pan-African. We have the leaders in the past that really set a good tone. You had the Kwame Nkrumahs of the past. You have the Julius Nyereres of the past. You have people that we can actually go back to and look how they did things for the sake of the people, not for the sake of themselves, not the deals that they can make with China or the outside world for that. So I'm hoping that leaders on the continent will really look back and see what our forefathers did to, you know, to really have that solidarity, that strength, that unity, and as well as that, you know, those strategies that they use to move the continent forward, the people's lives, to better the people's lives, and also for the women particularly. I mean, I'm looking at how women who have been now given the platform, we're seeing more and more women being given a platform. They're being given a voice at the table. How are they going to use that voice? For me, I'm hoping to see that women will support one another, they will strengthen each other, they will support each other physically, financially, spiritually, emotionally, so that they can move up the ladder in numbers, not just one at a time, but in numbers. I'm hoping for that.
Yeah, and Haiti, you mentioned Time's Up and the Me Too movement. And it's interesting because in South Sudan, the women there have a hashtag that says, Hear Me Too, so as to say that their voices are often ignored. And I think that's actually true. My hope for women in 2019 is that their voices are heard, because a lot of the issues that women all over the world go through, African women also go through it. And, I was surprised to learn that the African Union didn't have a sexual harassment policy.
Club.
Yeah, so I hope that in the next year the voices of women will really, really be heard, and I hope that they continue to speak up, because that's how we create change, is when we use our voices.
My wish is about the women of South Sudan and women like them who are often depicted in such negative terms. I hope that in the way women are portrayed will be more constructive, more balanced, and more thorough as we go forward. And that we'll move away from this idea that women are the victims. We use them as victims of violence to illustrate the scale of conflict and disaster on the continent. We've all seen the headlines, or we've all seen this line in stories: 250,000 people displaced, including women and children. I think that when we keep grouping women with children, we constantly depict them as being in a state of victimhood, in need of rescuing. There needs to be a bigger focus on the structures and the systems that are designed to hold women back and almost guarantee their failure. And so women have to work 10 times harder to overcome those barriers. And so when a woman faces conflict, that's not the only thing she's facing, the violence. She doesn't have access to education. Illiteracy is another problem she has to deal with. We need to look, even in stable countries, at our banking systems that prevent women from accessing finance so that they can start their own businesses and start contributing to the economy in the way that they should and the way that they want to. Look at our legal systems that don't hold to account those people who are violating women's rights, and also our political systems that don't do enough to empower women and implement these laws, these progressive laws we always brag about. But in effect, how effective are those laws in protecting women's rights, and are we implementing those laws? So I think instead of just tallying the body count, we need to look at these systems, and I'd also like to see more of a focus on ordinary women, those unsung heroes in our communities who are the real agents of change every single day in the face of considerable odds. And I really hope there's going to be more of a focus on that narrative.
Yes,
and
for
I
sure.
agree with all of you ladies, but I think part of the reason is the lack of understanding of women on what their rights are. There's so many laws that protect women, they're not even aware of it. So I'm hoping that women will probably get to understand more of what their rights are, and how it actually would cover them. And I would also like to see women support each other, because women like to bring each other down. So hopefully women will be able to support each other. And I would like to see more women, included in politics. By the way, lots of hope for women. So still ahead on Our Voices, we've got some fascinating women to keep your eye on in the year ahead.
Welcome back to Our Voices. Women in Africa and around the world are doing extraordinary things, and we highlight their contribution here at Our Voices. We're in a segment called Women to Watch. Here are some of them that we are watching in the year 2019.
My woman to watch is Fatima Samba Diop Samora, a Senegalese former diplomat appointed as the first female Secretary General of FIFA in May 2016. In 2018, she ranked #1 in Forbes' most powerful women in international sports. Holding a senior position in a male-dominated organization like FIFA is no easy feat. She says there are people who don't think that a black woman should be leading the administration of FIFA. It's sometimes as simple as that. It is something we're fighting on a daily basis on the pitch. I don't want any racist person around me. Nobody asks a man when he takes a position if he's competent to do the job. They just assume that he can do the job. For a woman to make her way to the top, you need to prove every single day that you are the best fit for that position.
It's definitely going to be an interesting year for women in soccer. I'm keeping an eye on Asisat Lamina Oshola, a Nigerian professional soccer player. She was named the best player and was the highest scorer at the 2014 FIFA Under-20 Women's World Cup. She was also named the best player and the second top goal scorer with the Super Falcon team, who won the 2014 African Women's Championship. She also won many other awards. As you know, Nigeria's team will be playing in 2019 as Women's World Cup, and Asisat will be playing, so we'll be keeping an eye on her as well as her teammates.
Well, some are good in football, others have healing hands, like my woman to watch. She's called the Miracle Doctor, Namibian ophthalmologist Dr. Helena Ndume. Now, she's the first ever woman recipient of the UN Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela Prize for her work in treating the blind in Southern Africa. She's a former refugee who went on to get an education in Germany. She came back home, and to date, she's restored the sight of tens of thousands of people who had gone blind from cataracts and other eye-related illnesses. She says you can't call yourself a developed country if people are still going blind from cataracts. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what she's going to be doing in the new year. Really a special woman.
She sounds like an incredible woman. Well, this year I'm watching not one but 37 women, all of them staff members of the African Union, who dared to speak up about the prevalence of sexual harassment at the AU. They remain anonymous, but their words broke the silence on the issue and forced the AU to reevaluate what's been called a boys' club. They signed a petition that launched a special investigation committee, which found 44 cases of alleged sexual harassment and that young women were being exploited for sex in exchange for jobs. The investigation also found that reporting sexual harassment at the AU is often difficult because there isn't a sexual harassment policy. Well, that is about to change. The AU has promised to take immediate action on urgent issues and establish a comprehensive sexual harassment policy. Although there's a lot more work to do, these 37 women started a conversation that will no doubt continue to take place in the coming year.
Way to go to the women.
Yeah, 37 of them.
Yeah. Well, you know the hashtag, VOA Our Voices. Tell us who you think is a woman to watch in the year ahead.
Be sure to watch Our Voices on the VOA website, where you can find the world's top news stories.
We leave you with a quote from Liberia's Lemi Bowie, who received the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011 for her contribution in putting to an end the Second Liberian Civil War in 2003 through a women's peace movement. She used her voice to say, "Be bold, step out, and never walk on tiptoes, because anyone who walks on tiptoes can never leave footprints for people to walk in."
And that is our show for today. We look forward to an exciting 2019 here on Our Voices. As always, thank you so very much for being with us. From all of us here at the Voice of America, until next time, goodbye.